Market manipulation and the psychology of the top, why beginners always buy the peak. Introduction, the chart every veteran recognizes. There is a chart that every experienced market participant can draw from memory, because they have watched it, or lived it, 100 times. A long, quiet base that nobody notices. A steady climb that a few early participants ride in silence. Then acceleration, headlines appear, taxi drivers and group chats start discussing the asset, prices go vertical. And there, in the euphoric final stretch, the steepest, loudest, most crowded segment of the entire move, arrives the beginner, savings in hand, buying with total conviction at prices that will not be seen again for years. The line rolls over. The veterans are gone. The beginner is now a long-term investor, involuntarily. Why does this happen with such crushing regularity, across centuries, across asset classes, from tulips to railways to dot-coms to meme stocks and coins? The lazy answer is stupidity, and it is wrong. Doctors, engineers, and mathematicians buy tops with everyone else. The real answer is a pincer with two arms. One arm is internal, a set of well-documented psychological biases that make the top feel, to normal human cognition, like the safest possible moment to buy. The other arm is external, a population of actors who understand those biases professionally and build the top for you, the way hunters build blinds. This article walks through both arms, first the machinery in your head, then the machinery pointed at it, and ends with the defenses. One note before we start, this is education about psychology and predatory schemes, not investment advice. The goal is that you recognize the pincer, whatever you ultimately do with your money. Part 1, the machinery in your head. Social proof and the safety of crowds. The beginner does not buy a price, he buys a consensus. By the time an asset reaches its vertical phase, everyone seems to agree, the news, the neighbors, the feed, and agreement reads, to our herd-wired brains, as safety. Here lies the market's cruelest inversion, the one that separates it from nearly every other domain of life. In markets, the crowd's maximum confidence and the point of maximum danger are the same point. Prices rise because buyers arrive. When everyone who could be convinced has been convinced and has bought, there is no one left to buy, and everyone is sure, is precisely the technical description of that moment. The instinct that kept your ancestors alive marks tops. FOMO and the arithmetic of envy. Nothing recruits like other people's gains. The beginner has usually watched from the sidelines for months, feeling, with each story of a colleague's doubled money, not greed exactly, but something sharper, the pain of exclusion. Loss aversion, the bedrock finding that losses hurt roughly twice as much as gains please, has a vicious corollary here. Missed gains are processed as losses. Every day of not buying feels like losing, and the feeling compounds until it overwhelms the question that should dominate, not, how much has it risen, but, what is left? The beginner buys to stop a pain, which is the worst of all reasons to enter a trade. Recency and the extrapolated line. Human intuition forecasts by extending the recent past. 6 months of up produces a felt certainty that up is what this thing does. The longer and smoother the climb, the deeper the certainty, which is why the safest feeling entry is mathematically the latest one. The veteran reads a parabolic chart as a fuel gauge nearing empty, the beginner reads the same chart as proof of a law of nature. The illusion arsenal, knowledge, control, and confirmation. The late cycle beginner is not ignorant, he is overinformed with one-sided information. He has watched the videos, joined the groups, learned the vocabulary, and fluency in a narrative feels indistinguishable, from inside, from understanding an asset. Confirmation bias curates his feed, bulls sound like insight, warnings sound like bitterness, and a first few wins, nearly guaranteed in a final melt-up, since everything is rising, complete the trap, he now has evidence he's good at this. Skill and a rising tide are indistinguishable exactly until the tide turns. And underneath it all, unanchored decisions. The beginner's deepest vulnerability is not any single bias but the absence of a framework the biases can be checked against, no valuation anchor, no position sizing rule, no exit plan. A trader with rules can feel every emotion above and still act correctly. A trader with only feelings is his feelings, and at the top, the feelings all point the same direction. In Part 2, the machinery pointed at your head. Now the external arm of the pincer, because the top is not merely found by beginners. It is, in a meaningful share of cases, manufactured for them. The pump and dump, industrialized. The oldest scheme in markets has a simple anatomy: accumulate a position quietly in something small and illiquid, ignite attention, feed the rise until crowds arrive, distribute your holdings into their buying, vanish. What has changed is the tooling. Where pumps once required boiler rooms of cold callers, they now run through influencer networks, coordinated posting campaigns, private signal groups, whose organizers, investigations repeatedly show, buy before signaling and sell into their own followers, and paid promotions that securities regulators around the world prosecute in a steady, endless stream. The scheme's genius is that its final phase is indistinguishable, to the newcomer, from a legitimate boom, rising price plus growing buzz. That resemblance is not accidental. It is the product. Painting the tape and its modern descendants. A family of techniques exists purely to fabricate the appearance of demand: wash trading, trading with oneself to inflate volume, spoofing, placing large orders one intends to cancel, to fake buying pressure, explicitly illegal in regulated markets and prosecuted, yet perennial, and coordinated, marking of prices at key moments. The common purpose: charts are read as evidence of other people's genuine conviction, so manipulators manufacture chart evidence the way forgers manufacture documents. The beginner does his own research, and the research is looking at forged demand. Narrative engineering. Every manufactured top rides a story, the technology that changes everything, the shortage that guarantees scarcity, that institutions are coming. Stories are chosen precisely because they are unfalsifiable on the timescale of the pump and emotionally superior to arithmetic. Watch for the narrative signature of distribution phases: urgency, last chance before it's too late, enemies, they don't want you to know, and the redefinition of skepticism as weakness: have fun staying poor. When doubting a trade becomes a character flaw in the community discussing it, the community has become a funnel. The exit asymmetry. Finally, understand the structural cruelty that makes all of this profitable: the insider's selling is what the beginner's buying is for. A large holder cannot exit a position without buyers to absorb it. Euphoria is not the byproduct of the top, euphoria is the liquidity event. Someone is selling you every share you buy, is the single most clarifying sentence in markets, and at the vertical stage of a chart, it is worth asking, specifically, who, holding since far lower prices, is so generously handing me this rocket? Part 3, the defenses. The pincer is beatable, not by intelligence, which it eats for breakfast, but by structure. 5 defenses, in ascending order of importance. 1. Invert the crowd signal. Retrain one reflex: mass certainty is a caution signal, not a comfort. When the asset reaches your relatives, your feeds, and the front pages simultaneously, you are not early, you are the audience of a distribution. This does not mean reflexively betting against crowds. Early trends are crowds too. It means the louder the consensus, the higher your burden of proof, which is the exact opposite of the beginner's instinct. 2. Replace "how much has it risen" with "what am I paying for?" Any purchase you cannot explain without referencing the recent price movement, some anchor of value, cash flow, utility, or at minimum an explicit, falsifiable thesis, is not an investment or even a trade. It is a bet that a stranger will pay more later, made at the moment strangers are most supplied. 3. Size for being wrong. The defense that survives all analytical failure: never a position so large that its worst case changes your life, never leverage you don't fully understand and can't fully lose, never money with a deadline, rent, tuition, emergency funds, exposed to markets at all. Position sizing is the only opinion about the future you're guaranteed to be right about. 4. Write the plan before the money moves. Entry reason, invalidation point: I am wrong if, exit conditions in both directions, written, before buying, when your mind is still yours. At the top, decisions get made by the crowd in your head, A written plan is a message from the calmer person you were, and following it mechanically is the entire discipline. The plan's first line, always, if the urgency is this loud, I can wait a week. Manufactured opportunities cannot survive a week. Real ones usually can. 5. Study manipulations like a naturalist. Read the enforcement actions, the postmortems of famous pumps, the anatomy of historical manias, not for trivia, but because pattern exposure is inoculation. The schemes barely change, only the tickers do. The trader who has seen 50 charts of manufactured euphoria recognizes the 51st while still on the sidelines, which is the only place recognition pays. A pre-purchase checklist, in one breath. Before any late cycle buy, run 6 questions. Where did I first hear about this, research, or my feed? Can I state the thesis without mentioning the recent price rise? Who is selling me this, and why now, after such gains? What is my written invalidation point? Does the position size survive a total loss without changing my life? And finally, if I had to wait 7 days, would the opportunity honestly still exist? 6 honest answers take 5 minutes and would have filtered out the overwhelming majority of history's bought tops, not because the questions are clever, but because manufactured euphoria cannot survive being asked anything at all. Conclusion: the top is a feeling before it is a price. Return to the chart from the opening, and read it now with both arms of the pincer visible. The beginner buys the peak not because he is foolish but because the peak is precisely engineered, by his own evolved shortcuts and, often enough, by professionals farming them, to feel like the safest point on the whole line, maximal consensus, maximal recent proof, maximal social pain of abstaining, maximal narrative clarity. Everything in him says now, and that unanimous internal shout is the top's true signature. The veteran's secret was never predicting prices, it was learning to hear that shout as an alarm. So take the transferable lesson, which is larger than markets. Wherever crowds, urgency, envy, and easy stories converge, in investments, in purchases, in movements, the moment of maximum comfort in a decision deserves your maximum scrutiny, because comfort at scale is manufacturable, and someone is usually manufacturing it. The beginner's education traditionally costs one bought top, paid in savings and shame. Let this article be the cheaper tuition, the same lesson, at the cost of 15 minutes, and the quiet, unfashionable, compounding superpower of being the one person in the euphoric room who checks what the certainty is made of before paying for it.